Welcome to episode 126 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm back with Tim. I think we missed a week or two, but we're back on track. We have a lot of guests lined up, so it's going to be a good summer. Good.
We are going to have a great summer. I'm sure of it. So Timothy Peterson here. Hey, everybody. Isaiah, I wanted to update you on a couple quick things, and for our listeners as well. This past week, I went to a huge corporate event at the New York Stock Exchange. I almost never go to these things, but friends of mine told me it would be fancy, and so I figured I'd go. And it was great. I met so many big investors and tech leaders and CEOs and whatever. And I was bouncing around with the people from, major companies. And I was talking to them about B2B e-commerce. I tried to squeeze that into conversations whenever it was appropriate. And, a lot of people admitted, and I'm not going to name their names here because it would embarrass them, that they just haven't invested enough and that they waited too long. And so I wanted to just tell our listeners that even these people at major companies said, you know what? We should have invested 5 years ago. We should have invested 9 years ago.
I assume these are, large manufacturers that have a big B2B component.
Very large, significant players, And again, I don't want to dump on all of them here by name, but the consensus is that even if they're making big strides now, that they really feel like they should have started much earlier. So This is really what we've wanted to talk about.
That's the wake-up call. Like, if you're not serious about it now, then...
Yeah, exactly. So to all our listeners who, I want to tell you that even the biggest players, these multi-billion-dollar businesses, kind of wish that they'd started earlier and, spent more and hired the right people and all that stuff. So thank you for listening. We're trying to help you out at whatever stage your business is in, and you're not alone. So let me put it that way. I'm not going to go through our shout outs today. That's the big shout out. I just wanted to mention the New York Stock Exchange and all these great people I met there. Thank you for hosting this huge event. It was fantastic. And now I want to just pause for a moment and let us have our sponsor mention. Then I will throw it back to Isaiah to introduce our incredible guests today. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance. Okay, I hope that was enough for folks to insert our sponsor mentions. Thank you to our sponsors. Isaiah, who do we have today?
Yeah, I'm excited to introduce Chris Baltusnik, e-commerce transformation and operations leader at Owens Corning. I'm trying to say that the best I can. It's quite a mouthful, but ultimately, Chris, my understanding, you've been hired at Owens Corning to lead the digital transformation to bring e-commerce more to the forefront, which I think was not the case in the past. So, thank you for joining.
Isaiah, you nailed the last name and my title, which I think you're probably in the vast minority who is actually able to get that. So congratulations there.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's super excited to be here, guys. I actually am a listener of your show, so we'll get into my background, but I went from B2C to B2B. And in that transition period, I was like, okay, it kind of hit me like, I don't know anything about B2B e-commerce. How is it different from B2C? So I was looking for podcasts to listen to. And I came across your guys and I thought it was great. So I'm very excited to be on the show today. You guys are like, it's like hearing your voice all the time and seeing your faces. It's just weird, you know?
Well,
Well,
thank
thank
you.
you for that.
Part of the reason we started it is when I was looking, COVID hit and there's nothing to do and you can't, it was hard to do anything productive. Sales were down, sales were down, events were dead. And I wanted to, market ourselves and, or just get out there and do something. And I knew the B2C podcasts were so saturated. I was like, we'll never show up for like, there's 1,000 Shopify podcasts or marketing e-commerce podcasts, but I couldn't, we were already doing a lot of B2B commerce at the time, and it was a big chunk of our kind of expertise, and I couldn't find any useful, good B2B content, honestly, a podcast. I think there was like one that had been started and then it stopped, and it was like 3 episodes, and it was like, so I was like, well, reached out on LinkedIn. We Tim and I got together, and it's almost 5 years now since we kind of
It's
kicked that off.
almost 5 years, and I like tooting our own horn on this. And thank you for saying that you are a listener, Chris, because we really hear from lots and lots of people about when they started listening or a favorite episode or something. So we
Yeah.
know that we're getting the word out, to some extent, and that was the whole point to begin with. So thank you.
I think you have probably a lot of people's background is they started some level of B2C and then that evolved into B2B. I guess what kind of can you go through that, and where was maybe some of the moments where you're like, oh wait, this is way different and it's not just like building a simple store and spending some like meta ads.
Yeah, isn't that the truth, right? There's no difference. They're the exact same. What are you talking about? But to your point, there is a lack of B2B content, right? Even today, like even as B2B matures digitally, I still feel like there is a lack of content. So, coming across you guys was great just to hear the leaders that you had on the show. And I know Justin King, who was on your show, he has a story about how he started, he was trying to be an expert in B2B, couldn't find anything anywhere. So he started a blog. Nobody looked at it. And then one year just took off, right? So it's kind of the same thing. So,
Yeah.
but to your question, I started out more so in the agency world where it started out like content production, CGI, photography, video, right? And then it was like the clients that we were providing this content to, this is 12 years ago, whatever it is, we're like, all right, great. They're marketing communications people. Great, we have this content, but we don't know like how to position it. We don't know what channels to put it in. We don't have an omni-channel strategy, if you will. So that's where I kind of came in and learned that overall e-commerce strategy, market positioning, how to kind of take it to the next level. And so I became more of a consultant on the e-commerce and on the digital front to say, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. I really learned like what tools were in place. I learned platforms, digital marketing that these companies now hire for, right? Now they have a whole team of 50 people who do these things. But back then, even, again, 10, 12 years ago, it really wasn't the same. Now, one of my clients while I was working in an agency was Goodyear. I did a ton for them, helped them get build on their D2C strategy of selling direct through their website. So eventually just ended up working for Goodyear direct, where it was more of that, let's develop the website, let's convert traffic through the website for direct selling. We implemented mobile installation, meaning you can literally just go on your cell phone, order tires, and then somebody will show up to your house in 2-3 days and just put the tires on your car and leave without you ever even talking to them. That's the dream, right? You don't even have to talk to somebody.
Wow.
What a time to be alive. And so fast forward a little bit. A little after COVID, I would say, I went.
We interject. We haven't figured that out in B2B. You can't get anything in B2B without talking to 20 people and,
Awesome.
emails and, so.
Yeah, Amazon's trying to figure that out right now, and maybe they will, but more on that later. But so fast forward, went over to Owens Corning. We're a building materials company, large scale, global. And I focus a lot on our insulation side of the business. So really, I'm developing overall e-commerce strategy, which didn't really exist before I came in. So Owens Corning was forward enough thinking to say, all right, maybe building materials isn't the most digitally mature category right now, but we see the writing on the wall, right? We see the little factors that are coming in saying it's growing. So I was hired to come in, build a strategy, implement, and get us into the sustainable digital future to outpace competition, right? As far as major differences that I've learned, I was super naive coming in, like, oh, I'm going to sell direct through the website and look for conversion tactics. I learned very early on that Owens Corning said, we're B2B. This is our value chain. Don't come in here with that sell direct through the website BS, right? So it was our selling chain is our customers, our distributors. We break it down into three sectors. It's distribution, marketplace, and then retail, which is Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards. That's how we sell right now. And it's a more complex buyer. It's a more complex product. Even give you an example for search for SEO. In Goodyear, you'd be bidding on terms like tires or nice tires, things like that.
Yeah. Best tires for this model or whatever.
Exactly. Tires for Mercedes. Whereas in B2B, it's like 6-inch fiberglass pipe insulation are what people are searching. So it is more profitable. It's there's more of a bulk buying play. It is less customers, but I would say the complexity is really what separates B2C to B2B.
Yeah.
So I just have a quick question in there because I've asked this of a lot of the folks who've come on. Why no D2C? I mean, is that something that will ever happen? Because, for me, it doesn't have to be, a huge percent, but why not at all?
So our D2C, if you will, is through like an Amazon or through a home center. So I guess you wouldn't consider that D2C. That would be more B2C. Mm-hmm. But we have customers. We have channel conflict with our customers. Our main goal right now is to help our customers grow and to feed our main value chain, basically build upon what got you there, right? Because we do still see a lot of growth for digital through a lot of our customers. So a lot of distribution customers that we have, they're very advanced digitally. And where I come in is I say we want to partner to position ourselves, to position Owens Corning and X, Y, and Z distributor to see exponential growth in this evolving ecosystem. But long story short, we don't want to disrupt our value chain, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the pricing conversations we've had many, many, many times with others. For some, the democratization of prices that comes through a D2C play it kind of ruins all of those other relationships that you have where everybody has their customized pricing and whatnot through. So I completely
now, Timothy, I will say I am working on developing a product segmentation strategy. So we have certain product lines right now that maybe more accessory products or more consumer driven products as opposed to B2B that I'm working on developing a plan in place where it may make more sense to sell those in different markets that are more like B2C, direct to consumer type plays.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you said something really important, which is B2B is generally a lot more complex. And especially in something like, building materials but really in general, right, you're dealing with bulk, larger quantities, generally the shipping's more complicated because you can't just send it out through UPS or it's maybe not as simple as that. And I think that the challenge we find in B2B is that people are starting to kind of realize they kind of know they need to do something, but it's more complex, which usually means you need to spend more money to build something that's actually useful. But because they've never really invested seriously in these things, or they don't have an ROI model for it, because, they're like, well, we already make money. Why would I spend $100,000 or $500,000 or $1 million on these tools when it's not even increasing my revenue? It's just taking my revenue and bringing it online. And I think that's where a lot of these B2B companies really struggle because the complexity is higher than B2C. So the projects are usually going to be bigger and more costly than a B2C project, and they have a less understanding of the ROI.
And you're absolutely right. And it's the cannibalization conversation that we always deal with. I dealt with that even in B2C at Goodyear. It was okay, you're implementing this. How do I know it's not just going to steal from traditional sales? Right. So it's like, it's kind of a show me the data kind of thing that I've always been working on. It's like everything that I do, everything that I position, I need to back it up with data to be able to leverage that to position to our GMs to say, this is why we're making that decision. This is why we're looking for X, Y, and Z investment. And this is the return that we can expect. Now, that can be more challenging. And a lot of times within like certain digital implementations, like say a PIM, proving revenue logic for like a PIM implementation. I don't know if you've ever tried to do that, but it is very challenging to build that out and to say
Sure,
like,
what do
this
you
is
mean? I have my data in the ERP, right? Like,
yeah,
we already have an ERP system. Why do we need a PIM system, right?
there you go. There you go. It's like the battles every day, right? And that's, that's not just unique to B2B though. That's B2C too. But I feel like there's less alignment in B2C because at the end of the day, B2C is more advanced, right?
It's also
Because
more
they've been doing it.
straightforward. Oh, we invest in this, my conversion rate goes up, I make more money, I get more traffic, I make more money. And some of the math is usually very simple to kind of like see how you're going to make more money.
But also what I'll say is there's significant more amount of customer data for B2C that, we had at Goodyear that maybe in a B2B company that just does not have access to. So, we don't sell direct. I don't own the customer, right? My customer is distribution who then sells to the end customer. So getting data from the contractor who buys through traditional distribution online is very hard to get to. And that's where it's important to be able to leverage relationships with distributors on my end to be able to develop those partnerships to get that data and really understand that customer, understand their journey, their buying habits, who's buying, why are they buying, right? It's been hard to get to. And I don't think that's unique to other B2B manufacturers who don't sell direct.
No, I mean, and just to comment on a couple things you just brought up, because these are great topics, is that, first the cannibalization piece, right? People love to talk about that. I mean, but what's interesting is at this point, because, and I can do this because I go into a lot of different clients and, they kind of call me in and say, what do I do? And how do you justify this? And I say, well, here's like the reams of data that show that everybody else did fine, so what's your complaint now, right? So people don't understand that there's so much history now from so many businesses, even within a very particular category, to say it's going to just improve if you do these things. Don't get crazy, don't get bent out of shape, just invest, right? So that's kind of part one. The part two about the complication of B2B, I love this topic. I mean, I love this topic because part of it is a choice on the part of B2B. Right? They don't have to make these things so complicated. They choose to. They choose to have such complicated pricing. They choose to have all of these different ways of selling that they don't happen in the B2C or D2C world. So again, when I go into places and say it's complicated, it's like, well, that's your fault, right? Why don't you simplify it?
Yeah, I think it's
fascinating.
It's a good point because that complexity adds cost, and it's like, but is that complexity adding value to the business? Mm-hmm. Is it making you more profitable?
And maybe, but not always. Yeah. Really not always. It's just what people have done, right?
And it depends on which factor you're going to say of said complexity, right? Some maybe more so than others are as far as a necessity, right? But again, we'd really have to pinpoint something so we can break it down and say, like, is this necessary? Is this not? I think that's how we look at it. But yeah, e-commerce digital should be all about streamlining for simplification, right? And we're building a lot of that right now internally with Owens Corning to simplify processes, make it easier for buyers, make like customer portals, right? Things like that. So seamless integration points through connecting systems together. So we are trying to get through the complexities that are necessary in some regard. But to your point, yes, there's always going to be complexities that exist that you're like, does that really need to exist?
I think the omni-channel thing is a no-brainer. And I think whether you're even direct to consumer, distributor, manufacturer, somewhere in that, like all the way from, retail focused to like industrial manufacturer, you have to have some sort of omni. I mean, I just talked to a small, historically D2C focused company, and they're like, their main focus is getting into retail because it's just so hard to grow purely in one channel on D2C, and it's so expensive, and you get beaten down with costs and things like that, and they've had to diversify, right? And so I think omni-channel is necessary for any company, especially manufacturers and distributors. I think probably the hardest part of managing that though is like, how did you go about trying to create kind of like a streamlining that, the operations of that, or the technology? Like, I think what I see is a lot of companies, they start buying all these hodgepodge, this mess, right? They buy Channel Advisor, they buy the PIM, they have the ERP, but like no one's really thought about how all these things work together. I've seen companies that have like 3 or 4 different middleware tools. Like they have like the whole purpose of like an iPass or like a Sligo, I don't know if you're familiar with, like, is to sit in the middle and centralize your integrations,
Right.
and all, and they have like 4 of them. And I'm like, because like they bought one for this and they bought like it. So how have you tried to kind of maybe, I guess, because you're starting almost like, it sounds like somewhat of a blank slate. Have you been thinking about how to simplify that or not add to that?
So we're an organization that is a build it ourselves organization, right? And
Yeah.
in some regard, it does make sense from a financial standpoint. Every company's different, right? So,
Yeah.
in Goodyear, it was like, let's throw a bunch of money at everything that we can and see what sticks kind of thing. Whereas at Owens Corning, it's more of an approach that we have a team in place, developers, and they're very strong. And let's first determine if we can build this centralized system internally before we go out. And there are cases, again, where it's like, yes, we could build this, but our workload right now, it's a 2025, 2026 initiative. So then we'll explore, then we'll kind of put together like missed revenue or, missed opportunities to say like, is this something we want to go spend money on now, or can't we wait to 2025? So to that point, from an omni-channel experience in terms of connecting all those points together, that's something we are establishing internally. And I have a counterpart on my team who's overall engagement systems, and he's doing a lot to ensure those seamless points. From my standpoint, how I'm looking at omni-channel is I'm looking at from a more customer-facing / consumer, where it's, okay, so before I develop my omni-channel strategy, I have to take a step back and really understand who my customer is, what their buying habits are, what their motivations are, how they're buying, where they're buying, what they're buying, right? And again, that's where I said it's kind of hard to get that data, but that's what we're exploring. So that's really what led us to like an Amazon. So by combing channels to say, all right, where is our customer buying that we're not present? And I heard somebody call it omnipresent instead of omni-channel, and that resonated with me because it's so true. But so that led us to explore channels. So I have tools in place where I can see our product categories transacting on Amazon and the revenue associated with that. And then really develop a strategic market size to say, these are apples to oranges of our products, of our categories. Here's the market size on Amazon for X, Y, and Z product. And then you determine it is a different consumer who buys on Amazon than it is who buys on a Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards. So the point isn't to jump into Amazon and cannibalize from other channels. The point is to jump on and steal the share that already exists, right? So like building that overall Amazon strategy. And I'll take it a step further. As you've determined that Amazon is incorporated in your omni-channel strategy, there's different ways to tackle Amazon, right? So if, leaning in is what I just said, whereas you make it a strategic sales channel and you really try to capture that share that exists. Maybe you want to use it as a marketing play to drive back to your traditional selling channels. So that's where you invest in A+ content and really just try to, because again, like in other channels, you don't have the flexibility with content that you do with Amazon. And they also have searchability on Amazon that you don't necessarily have with other channels. So you can use it as a marketing play to get people to see your product, and then they're going to just buy it on your traditional channels. Or you can just use it maybe there's too much conflict in selling on Amazon. You just want to use it as a control tactic. And I built out an authorized reselling platform where I can go in and see that X, Y, and Z company or individual seller is selling my products on Amazon, and they're not abiding by any kind of price restriction, and they're hurting the brand with poor reviews, and maybe it's a counterfeit product.
Yeah, you want to take ownership of Amazon and not just like
Yep.
let it become a wild west.
Amazon's such a growing beast that by putting your head in the sand and saying, I'm not going to even acknowledge that it exists in hopes that it goes away, is like almost on the same boat as saying, I'm going to ignore AI and hope it goes away.
Yeah. Or
Right.
not ignore all digital transformation and just like stay analog forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be like a JC Penney who back in the day said, this e-commerce thing is stupid.
Yeah.
We're just
Toys
gonna...
R Us. I don't know if you saw Toys R Us just relaunched Toys R Us just relaunched on Shopify. I thought that was ironic because like, you know, it's relatively easy to launch like a basic Shopify site, and after all these years, it's like, well, I guess all they needed to do was just like launch a Shopify site to stay alive. You know, like I don't know.
That's funny you say that because I was in Dallas this week, and so I was flying home yesterday, and there was a Toys R Us in the Dallas airport. I was like, I have not seen one of those in God knows how long.
Someone must have bought them. Do you know who bought those?
They were, yeah, I know that whole story. The short version is that they went into bankruptcy. Their intellectual property and all that stuff was bought, relaunched by a totally different group. They have nothing to do with the earlier one. And they're in every Macy's. They have a shop in every Macy's. They started last holiday season. Those are not going well. So the retail presence is not going well there. Then they decide to do like airport and small version ones and online. So, you know, wild card. We'll see where that goes because they made a lot of mistakes. You know,
Shopify site's not bad. I don't know if you go to it, it's not bad.
Interesting. I will check that out. As long as Jeffrey the Giraffe is still there, I'm good.
Jeffrey the Giraffe is there. They have a bench and I read this whole thing. It's just hilarious. They put a bench in every location with Jeffrey Giraffe so you can take selfies next to him.
All right, I'm in. I'll check it out.
The problem, and it's still the problem with that business, is that it's so price. You know, Amazon has made price. You know, it's so price conscious because you can probably go and find those same toys on 100 different places.
Amazon and Target took the whole toy business from Toys R Us. I mean, when Toys R Us was going down the toilet, Target increased their toy presence tremendously. Walmart already had a lot of toys, but Target took a lot of people from Toys R Us.
So I think
it was such a culture shock for me to, you know, when I had kids, to realize like when they say they want to go to the toy store, they're saying Target. Like that's crazy to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. They really built a toy store in every Target, which other people did not do. They did a great job at that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little scary, but it shows you how quickly you can be disrupted, right? And so I think
it took a minute. It really did.
Yeah, I think something we've talked a lot on this podcast is like I feel like B2B has gotten away with like not being fully disrupted yet. Like they haven't quite become the JC Penney or the, you know, Toys R Us yet of whatever distribution but I do think that's coming if they like you said, if they put their head in the sand and ignore Amazon.
One thing I would bring up too is, you know, I'm not always a fan of the word omnichannel, even though I use it a lot, and I've called myself an omnichannel person. All this, you know, I've done retail, I've done e-commerce, you know, I've done a lot of different things, right? Because the reason I think is that I've kind of concluded that it's the customer and it's whatever the customer does wherever they do it, right? So the customer is the channel. So if the customer tells me, like the customer for everything Owens Corning makes, that they want to buy everything on TikTok, then that's where I'm going, right? You know, that's sort of the way that I look at these things in a very, very high level, simplified way. It's like, what does the customer of these products or services really want to do? And then we just figure that out, right? We try to figure out like, all right, well, they don't want to do it here anymore. Why do they want to do it here? How do we get there, right? It's that kind of story. You know? Yeah,
and it's being present where your customers are buying, right? Be present where if your customers are searching on Amazon, which ours are, and many others are, then have some kind of strategy around that. And then taking that a step further is I didn't think that this would have hit our industry, but it has in a big way. And B2B in general is like mobile buying. So be where your customers are present and enable tools that your customers are using. So your customers are searching, whether they're buying or not, on their phones, but they're absolutely searching on their phones or looking at your products on their phones.
Absolutely.
So you have to be mobile compatible, like in B2B. People think of that as a B2B strategy or B2C strategy. That's fine. But
Yeah.
I mean, the growth, I just saw the numbers come from, I think, Digital Commerce 360, like a couple weeks ago, about mobile buying on B2B. It's taken off. It's insane.
It's huge. It's huge. The people that I've worked with recently and that I am working with now in B2B, huge. Mobile is huge. All of their customers and their end consumers and all these terms that we use, they all use it or they want to, right? I mean, so that's what we've got to move toward.
Yeah. And then there's the BOPIS, is the buy online, pick up in store. It's like, I don't think people understand the importance of having that enabled in, like, that Home Depot does a great job of that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But I was talking to a distributor the other day, not one of our customers, just somebody that I met at a show, and they didn't understand the value in buy online, pick up in store, and they just didn't want to acknowledge it. And I was like, you're going to really struggle because of that. I mean, the amount of people that are doing that in today's world is just growing by the day.
I mean,
Oh,
it's so convenient to be able to. My wife does it more than I do, but like, you just show up. I think you usually you just kind of say, "Oh, I'm here." They have their little stations or whatever spots, and they come out. They essentially deliver it to you, and you don't even have to basically don't have to get out of your car. You know, and so yeah.
I'll bring up something else.
Space,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, in our space, for like a contractor who pretty much buys the same product like frequently, and they don't have to shop; they know exactly what they're buying. So to your point, Isaiah, they just click a button, add cart, buy, come pick it up, go to the job site. I mean, it's a no-brainer,
Well, I'll add one layer to this that's really surprising to me, but see what you think, right? Instacart, right? So Instacart, has been started with grocery, expanded into everything, right? They're selling stuff from a Home Depot, right, through Instacart now. So, and they don't have everything that's available in store that you can order through Instacart for B2C, for consumer. However, Instacart is launching B2B. That's something that I was talking with people about kind of, and, nobody knows this, sorry, Instacart. But, I heard this through the grapevine. So they're going to have everything that's available at Home Depot flowing through an Instacart app now, where you'll have to make appointments. I think it's like whatever, like once a day or something.
Right.
I'll have the trucks go around, deliver, but same day, right? Same day Instacart B2B deliveries from Home Depot. I really like that.
Yeah.
I really do like that. I know you can do this in other ways or whatever, but it does change the way that people are looking at how B2B happens now, right? If I can go to Instacart and order my groceries and the next transaction switch to B2B and order building materials, that's a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah.
And that's and that's interesting. And I have heard that before. That's exactly the biggest, I would say, problem. I don't necessarily want to call it a problem, but that's the biggest need in our industry, is to be able to have a contractor just, oh man, I'm at a job site and I forgot X, Y, and Z product. Order it online, have it show up to the job site same day, right?
Yep.
And I know for a fact that Amazon is really invested in tackling that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if drones are dropping off a giant building.
I don't know. They'll be dropping it from a roof or something.
It's pretty dangerous. But I think going back to what you originally said, which is like you put a lot of thought into the strategy, and I think that most of these B2B companies, you guys seem to have a little bit of a luxury of being a larger company where you have someone like you that focuses on strategy. You have internal tech people that can custom build and build tools that you need. I mean, how do you think, if you're, I guess, like a smaller, or mid-sized company, maybe they don't have quite the level of resources that you guys have. But I think it's important to be thinking about those types of skill sets, because I see that like a lot of smaller companies are just like, all right, you're the IT guy, you're in charge of all e-commerce, so you have to But really what they're saying is like, you need to be in charge of the strategy, the marketing, the IT. It's like they try and put in like four jobs into one. And it's like, of course, there's not going to be a good strategy when we put the guy in charge of the ERP who's just trying to keep the lights on like tech. He's not going to be thinking about Amazon strategy. You know what I mean? Like, and so I guess where would you start if you were, you know?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And that's something that I've really been invested in trying to solve and figure out like the most optimal way to structure a digital team. Right. And so I actually just led a table discussion out in San Diego with a bunch of just executives in B2B about this topic. And so let me ask the both of you a question. In terms of B2B digital, who owns the customer? Who would you say in a company should own that customer and customer experience, I should say?
Well, should and does, I would say it's typically sales, the sales reps, right? And so I think most of the B2B organizations that are heavy B2B, traditional B2B, I feel like even marketing is kind of secondary and it's very direct selling through sales reps. And they're the ones kind of controlling most of the, whether it's inside sales or outside sales, some sort of. Should they do that is, I think, a different question, but I think that's generally how they're currently operating.
Sure. So for Timothy, I'd be interested to hear your opinion on
Yeah,
that.
I mean, my view is not so different from Isaiah's. I think should and what it is are a little bit, they're not together right now. I mean, I would like to see a commerce organization as opposed to calling it sales or e-commerce or all these other things,
Yeah.
where it really is focus on selling in general. And as I said, that kind of takes away this whole idea of channels as well. It's like, how are we engaging in commerce? And there's a structure built around that. So I feel like the ideal is something closer to that, because it's not really about like, here's the retail store and here's the
The
catalog.
go-to-market team, right? Like
It's like the go-to-market team. So I want to see that kind of ownership, and that's what we move toward. What we have now, I've worked with almost every structure you can imagine at this point, and they all can work, but they often get kind of gummed up in hierarchies and like, weird org charts because they don't necessarily.
Where I
they
see
weren't meant to be that.
oftentimes e-commerce is reporting to IT, and
Yeah,
then
they weren't meant to be that.
technical. It's all about saving costs in tech, or it reports to marketing, but marketing is like this little neglected department in this B2B org that's sale. You know what I mean? And then sometimes I've seen it report to sales actually, which,
And I'll just say this last piece because I'm an old timer, right? And I love saying this to people. I've been doing e-commerce since the 90s. All right. It's a long, long, long time. So I've really been doing this a long time. And I feel like, some things that we're still doing, we might as well be like, opening a blacksmith shop and, shoes for the horses. And it's like, everything is so old fashioned. It's like, let me get my donkey and bring it down the hallway. I really want people to think more holistically, more future focused, more like what's the best way to do it as opposed to like what legacy things are we still stuck with that we have to adapt, right? That's kind of the way that I try to approach it at this point.
Yeah. And the reason I asked you is because like in these discussions that I've been having, this topic always comes up and I've heard every single answer. I don't think anyone's unified on a specific answer. I've heard CRO, I've heard IT, I've heard CMO, I've heard CEO. And yeah, I know, it's give and take. Does the company have a CDO? There's chief experience officers that companies are hiring, right? So a little bit of everything, but it's like, it's not a unified, I think you have to identify first who owns the digital customer experience and then kind of build it backwards from that. So in my opinion, and Isaiah, you brought up a good point. It's like a lot of structures do fall with it under IT, which doesn't make any sense to me because it's like, all right, it would be like the same as the person who builds the car then owns the selling experience for the car, right? So like that doesn't make sense. But I would say that whoever owns the data would be the one who owns the customer experience. And thus that should be where the digital structure is built under. So that, and that's not giving a specific answer because every company is different. But in my experience, I've seen that as a lot of times like the CMO or the CDO, right? And then
a lot of these organizations and manufacturing distributor don't even have a real CMO or really anyone that's analyzing the data. From my experience, they
you're
have
absolutely right.
very little understanding of their own data. It's such a neglected part of. I find most companies honestly under 500. Maybe once you're over $1 billion, you've invested in that stuff. But most of the companies I find, like even in the hundreds of millions, are still not doing much there.
I agree. It's a huge problem, especially in B2B. And I brought that up earlier. It's like, how do you make these decisions without leveraging data, right? Every decision that we make should have data behind it. And
I think if you asked most companies that are, let's say 10 to 500 million that are B2B focused, let's say like 80% or 90% of their business is B2B, they would almost not be able to answer that question. Like they'd be like, well, our sales reps do this, or, but they wouldn't actually be like, oh, 73% of these do, like, they wouldn't be able to give you like actual detailed analytical data on what.
Data, I'm going to jump on your bandwagon, Chris, and talk about this. Data is powerful. I mean, data, there's no question that data is power, because in my own career, I've been in data roles and turned those into other roles because I was the one who saw everything, right? So, when I was the head of business intelligence at Nature's Bounty, I ended up taking over direct to consumer, right? Because I had the data. And I was like, well, here's how everything works in vitamin C. And they were not making money over here, and you're making it over there. And it's like, it's only because I knew it, right? And my team knew it cold. And then we said, how do we put together all of the structures in order to get, things to happen the way that they should? So yes, I mean, I will jump on the data bandwagon, but it's very strange how other companies are structured. If you already have a CMO and they're not responsible for this stuff because they came up a whole different path, they're like a branding person or something, then the CMO is not going to be the right person. If you don't have a CDO, right?
I think you're bringing up a really important point, which is probably where most of these companies should start is, what is the state of our data? Who owns our data? And, how are we going to take data more seriously as a B2B organization? And I think that the reason they haven't is because everything has been such a direct selling process of sales rep going to going to the customer in person or call. Like, it's been such a one-to-one relationship based business that there was really no need, or historically there wasn't much of a need of being like a data-driven organization, because it was all about how you had good, building a good sales force that was going out and selling. Literally just the death of a salesman, or what is that? I think that was like the digital commerce.
The death of a B2B salesman.
Yeah, I think it was digital commerce 360, but they've never actually thought about, okay, if we're moving away from that or we're transforming, well, what's the core piece of that? It's data. And no one, they have IT and stuff, but even the IT people, I feel like generally aren't necessarily, they're not analyzing the data. They're maybe making sure that things work, sort of.
It's more like the hardware. They're more like structure, right?
Yeah, they're making sure it works, but they're not necessarily going and saying, oh, who's our top customer last month? What are our top selling products last month? They're not. I mean, maybe some really good IT organizations are doing that, but to your point, that's more of like a marketing function, right? And I find most of these companies just don't have anything like that,
And that's something we're doing a good job of, and we're getting even better at it, is really understanding that data, housing it, and making it accessible for everyone to view, right? So that we can all combined be able to leverage it to make decisions that we want to do that impact our business as a whole. And, Timothy, that was a great example where you said, you owned it. So you're like, well, I guess this is my role now, right? Because it is a transition point to say, you understand that, you know what to do with it to be successful. You're not just throwing a bunch of, at the wall, hoping what sticks. You're having being able to leverage this data behind it to say, I know this is going to work because this tells me it's going to work, right? And so that's all I'm trying to do. That's all I'm trying to bring to the company. Within everything that I do, I can't, as far as like internal adoption, I can't sell anything internally by just saying, trust me, this works. So this is going to work, right? And why would they take just take what I say? How much better is it to say, this is why it'll work because here's the data, right?
How, tell us about how have you been able to get the data that you want? Like, are people creating reports in like Google Data Studio or a Looker report or some like, if you were to say, okay, I want to get our whatever top products for distributors that are distributor segments, like, are you generally able to get the data that you want from the team?
I can get that. Yeah. Now the data that I'm really trying to get right now, like anything internal is fine. Like getting the data to say like, this is the amount we sell to our customers. This is the amount we sell through like Home Depot, whatever. That's fine. The part that I'm really investing in right now is to get the data from our customers or distributors to say, okay, like the end customer is this category and is buying this amount of product, to really understand that end customer as opposed to our distributors, right? So by doing that, I can be able to work with our distributors to really put investment back into the product, back into that customer to drive sales. Like for instance, I can, there's like pay to play opportunities with distributors. I can then utilize marketing dollars to be like, okay, there's an underperforming category in our product line through your channels that we know because we have the data. So now we can invest marketing dollars and target that through additional channels to drive sales to that product category, right? So like we don't know how to make those decisions without knowing what the customer is buying of our product.
Are they generally giving you the data, or do you ever run into issues where they're like, no, we don't want to tell you because for whatever reason?
Some are much better than others. Let's put it that way. Some are, I would say most of the conversations have been great. It's just getting to that conversation. Then once it's there, it's like whoever is the VP of digital for distributor, they're always like thrilled to talk to me. They're like, we love when our suppliers come at us from a digital standpoint because we don't usually get that from our suppliers. So they're always very open to talk and determine, at some point, like there's only so much data they can give. There's some proprietary information that they just can't, which makes sense. But as far as like getting data to understand their customer and for our products and like percentage eCommerce, for instance, so we can determine a strategy to drive that. They've been pretty good at handing that over so we can work together to figure out how to grow.
Well, there are a couple observations on this too, and you may be doing some of this already, but some of the other folks that, I know and I work with, they've worked with their distributors to set up, customer panels that include end consumers from each of their distributors, right? So you're not just going to if you had direct to consumer, you're not just saying, oh, I have these people and I have their data and I'm going to get feedback from them. You're actually getting data directly from end consumers through these distributors in your network, nationwide, worldwide. And you're figuring out how to incentivize that to happen, of course, to make sure that it happens. But basically what happens is they all say yes in the end because then they feel excluded, like their end consumers aren't being heard, right? You get all of that data and then you're getting tons and tons of great data. It's like, well, I like this, but I can't get it here. Or why aren't you making Y? Or why is the price so weird here and I could see it over there, but I buy from you guys because I kind of feel like I have to. You get all this great feedback that way. So is that something you've considered or are you working on or?
Yeah, it is something, it's in the works in terms of how we position it. It's a little different than how you explained it for a couple of various reasons, but it is something we're exploring in terms of how do we really just overall, the main question is how do we work with our customers? How do we partner with our customers to grow our overall sales and their overall sales? Like they grow, we grow type of thing. And then like I'm doing that from, we've been doing that from the traditional sales side for forever. And now I'm engaging with the digital teams to figure out a way to do that on the digital front as well. So they've been very receptive. It's been just, the partnerships I've established so far have been just exponentially great and just drove us to a new realm of success, I'd say.
Yeah, the other last thing I would say on this topic too is that you do have a lot of power in this, of course, because you could rewrite all sorts of agreements and talk about what sort of
Yeah.
things you can offer every single distributor if they decide to do these things with you. It's like, well, this is the new way we share data and we look for end consumers and whatever. And I've written some of those agreements, to be honest. I've written those for B2B companies. And in the end, after a matter of months, everyone stops kicking and screaming, and they all say, "Okay, fine, we'll do this. It's great. It'll be wonderful. It's to our benefit. I totally get it." And then you get exactly what you want, and you are benefiting them, and you can prove it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's the great thing. You can prove it. It's a loop.
exactly.
I want to ask about, because this is interesting. The internal data you guys are kind of on top of, which is probably a step ahead of most B2B organizations, and just analyzing that and mastering that side. But as you're gaining this downstream data, let's call it like the level 2 data, or the data that your customers have, are you noticing any interesting trends about, like, hey, our distributors that are selling more through digital or e-commerce are actually growing faster, or the products that they're selling online are growing faster? Like, is there any trends within that are like, oh, our customers do want to buy online, like, I'm just curious how that's kind of impacted the strategy at all.
Well, that's funny that you asked. So that's literally why I was traveling this week. That exact question right there. It was so one of our customers has a strong mentality to grow digital channels because they feel that as they grow e-commerce, their overall sales are going to grow from a standpoint of like average order value, just all of that stuff.
Marketing, it's easier to market in e-commerce, and
it's going to be, and like the question on our end is like, that we have to fight is, it's just going to be cannibalization through retail. And it's like, yes, but as they grow digitally, the intention is that they're going to position themselves for the future and they're going to grow business through like AOV and things like that. So I had just asked this customer, I said, okay, they do their e-commerce through their stores. And I said, give me a couple stores who are doing very good at e-commerce, that are, they have stores that are doing like 40, 50% e-commerce. And they have stores that are doing 0% e-commerce. And I said, show me the
franchise model. Are they like a franchisee kind of model, or
kind of? Yeah, it's something similar to that.
Sure.
There's company owned and just like outside owned, and it's kind of the same model that Goodyear went with their installers as well. Mm-hmm. But so I'm saying, show me the data for that of those stores that are like 40% e-commerce, and show me their sales trends to say like, okay, when they were at 20% e-commerce, this is what sales looked like. When they were at 40% e-commerce, this is what sales looked like. And how did Owens Corning specific products also grow in that time period, right? So that's what we're working on right now. But no, that's a great question. It's something that I'm actively trying to get to.
You're going to have to, we're going to need you to like come back as soon. We're going to have to get that. I don't know if you're, what you'll be allowed to share, but that's going to be really, I think, interesting.
I'm excited to see it.
And yeah.
Let me ask a question as part of what you were asking. I want to see if I can get a little more on this one piece. So like product specific stuff. So just out of curiosity, and you don't have to tell us, if it's competitive and you don't want it out there, but like, have you learned something really specific about products by getting the data through your customers and their end consumers coming back saying, oh, this product is the fastest growing one in the South, or this is the fastest growing for this environmental reason, or anything of that sort you can share?
Yeah, I just to kind of be a little more broad, but we have product categories that are growing at an exponential rate on through online channels, and some that are growing at a slower rate. So it's like, then you strategize with your marketing efforts to say, like, do we want to put marketing behind the ones that are slower growth, or are these just not there yet as far as digital maturity goes? And we double down on the ones that are doing really well to just like kind of blow the category out of the water, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's very interesting to see like there's categories that I would have never thought were growing on e-commerce that are growing, and there's categories that I expected to grow on e-commerce that aren't. And
Not always intuitive, right? And that's why you kind of need to get the data, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and then from a territory standpoint, exactly what you said as well. Like there's products that are doing better in southern territories, and you don't think of it, but when you see which products are doing better, you start to really wrap your head around it and say, okay, that does make sense, but that's not something I was thinking of. So it's like the data made things make sense, right? So yes, we're getting very granular, very specific in terms of how deep we dive to really understand our products and how they're transacting through digital channels.
And again, I don't want to share too much here either because of the folks I'm working with, but in B2C, I find this fascinating because it's true in B2B and B2C. In B2C, I was doing this analysis with some people and they have distributor networks and whatever, and they do a lot of apparel and fashion accessories and stuff. And what they learned, they were looking at all these color analyses, like, where do people buy red? Where do people buy blue? But it's the kind of thing you don't really think about, because like red and blue are, colors that you feel like everybody knows everybody likes. But when you're buying apparel and these accessories and stuff, it's like, well, wait a minute. Why is it that Michigan buys all of this big blue? Right? They buy all of this blue clothing, right? And it's really that specific and direct and amazing when you start getting into all this stuff. And they had no access to that data, really.
Yeah.
They were selling, but then they needed to get it through their network and have it come back.
Easy with the Michigan Blue, though. I'm an Ohio State guy, so.
Oh, there you go.
I want to, because we're gonna run out of time. You guys build a lot of internal tools, and it seems to work well with your guys, size of business and maybe talent internally. But I would imagine that most companies probably need to look. Generally buy, right? Look at vendors, look at platforms like whatever, a Magento, Shopify. I'm just curious, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the core e-commerce platform, but are there certain platforms that you feel like are doing a really good job in B2B and you feel like are culturally moving in the right direction with B2B? It could be a PIM system. I know we're joking PIM and
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I've, at Goodyear, we went through a re-platform. So we put together a big RFP where a bunch of the platform companies came in and pitched. And then, really just, we have built internally ourselves. It just makes sense from a financial standpoint. However, I've been very involved with kind of like exploring, for potentially the future, just platforms that make the most sense. And from a B2B standpoint, the one I've been very impressed with is Commerce Tools. And I don't know how you feel about that, but in my opinion, it's like, like a lot of the other, I call them like legacy platforms, right? That's the SAP, Hybris, Adobe, Magento, whatever it is. And I know like everyone's going headless, that's fine, but I still look at them as more like monolithic, right? And maybe you disagree with that, maybe not. But not only that, but like they were established before the cloud, right? And it's very hard to get to a point where you're more like, you have more cloud nativity, I would say. And Commerce Tools was established later in the game. So not only are they like fully headless to the point of composable, but they're very component based and tech agnostic. And I think Shopify B2B does a really good job too. But I don't look at them as, I know they have like Shopify components now.
Yeah, they're not as like bring your own thing to the table, right?
Exactly.
They're kind of more usually playing heavier in the Shopify ecosystem if you go to Shopify.
So for a company like ours, who's more so like we need control, we typically always build internally. We have our own developers. We need like that component-based tech agnostic solution. And I know a lot of other B2B companies do, and a lot of our competitors do too. And not our competitors, our customers. And a lot of them are using Commerce Tools. So that's kind of how I got introduced to Commerce Tools.
I think
I've been really impressed.
I think from a headless perspective, they're definitely the leader, right? That's where they kind of built their bread and butter. I think the challenge we see is in the lower ends of the market. Most companies can't afford headless yet. Like they're not ready for that complexity. So, a lot of these B2B guys struggle just to get up and running on the traditional monolithic strategy. And it's like they can't even get that going well.
Yeah,
Like
I
trying to
know.
get headless is like a whole nother level. One that I would definitely recommend you look at that we've been pretty impressed with is BigCommerce Catalyst and their composable strategy. They were, they have obviously been more of a traditional, well, they're SaaS, so I think they have a lot of the SaaS advantages, but we're seeing a lot of momentum with them in the headless space. And they're kind of like an interesting middle ground between kind of like Shopify, where they're a little more agnostic than a Shopify, where they're like, you don't have to use, you can use whatever
Yeah.
payment gateway and they'll work with Contentful or whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting that you mentioned because in a sense it's like a lot of people start Shopify because that's what they know. Then BigCommerce would be a great next step for a whole middle range of businesses. And commerce tools, it's what you said. You've got to be mature and
For
you've
sure.
got to have resources and you have to know what you're doing. I'm not going to just say let's have a startup and get commerce tools. You know what I mean? It's not
Oh yeah,
how
no,
I
you
do.
it's where you're at from a digital maturity standpoint, and for like a B2B company like ours, who and a lot of again my customers who are mature digitally and you know what they're doing. It really makes sense to use like a super headless platform like a commerce tools.
absolutely.
I do think we need to see consolidation. Like there's like Elastic Path and then there's Kibo and like
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough I think it's hard for any of these platforms to really survive in the long run. And that's why I think Shopify's done so well because they have so much momentum from a marketing and growth standpoint. And they're like if you think about their market share compared to everyone else, they're like so far ahead. It's like insane, right? Like from a revenue and market. I think like Commerce Tools should just go out and buy the other headless tools, honestly, in
Well,
my opinion. And just like
the way
wrap them in, like let's consolidate to one, like,
the parallel that I put out there is that, and again, I'm old enough to remember this, but the PC wars and whatever, there were dozens of companies making PCs, right? Dozens. Nobody would even remember their names at this point. They're just completely gone
now
now.
it's like Lenovo and HP or Dell, right? Like there's really only like three or
There's
four.
really like two, three,
Yeah.
however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
It really is. I feel like that's the natural progression. Like we're maturing in a lot of ways for B2B and B2C, what the options are and the big players. And, there aren't going to be that many people unless you have the most bizarrely specific need that there has to be a company just for you. There's
Yeah.
not going to need to be 40 players, 50 players, 200 players. There's no need.
I agree with you 100%. That's kind of why I brought up commerce tools because I think they are in like a niche market, whereas like they're targeting those digitally advanced customers who really need those components-based solutions to be successful. And I think you're going to see them grow. And they are growing significantly over the past couple of years, and I think they're going to continue to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's really only going to be, 4 or 5 survivors that like I would bet on. Like, maybe some of the other ones survive in their own way, and who knows? But it's obviously Shopify. I mean, they're not. It's got to be Shopify, right? As number one. I think BigCommerce is going to find its footing, although it's going to be hard, right? They have their challenges, but they have a decent sized customer base, and they have a new president, and they may get bought out, but I think that might help them. We'll see. And then I think Commerce Tools will survive, but I really do think they might want to buy the other headless, like smaller headless players, and consolidate that.
Yeah, maybe they will.
I think
I would say that I could see Hybris and Salesforce survive simply because
I don't know.
Salesforce has the best CRM and they leverage that. Hybris has the best ERP and they leverage
But
that.
I don't know if Hybris will. The thing about Hybris, in my opinion, is, I mean, why not just in it? Because it's not like it's natively really integrated. It's still a separate.
No, they're monolith. They're like the ultimate monolith.
I mean, I personally, I don't think Hybris is. I think eventually, I think the only reason Hybris is surviving is because those sites are so big and messy that those companies don't want to spend $10 million to get off.
That's true. That's probably
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But I think eventually, I mean, we saw with Oracle ATG that died off. I personally think Hybris is one of the next to die. Salesforce, I'm kind of 50-50 on. They may find their footing, but I think they have a major strategy issue and a leadership and kind of. And I do think Magento and Adobe Commerce will survive. I think that they have a lot of legacy problems, and I've been in that community for 12 years, but I think that they still have enough of like the open source community plus Adobe that it'll keep them kind of going forward. And Salesforce may be kind of similar to that. The problem is Salesforce doesn't have the open source, kind of long tail that Adobe does. So
Right.
I don't know. It'll be interesting. Salesforce is still, they're not going to just like fall off the face of the earth tomorrow, but I probably wouldn't, but besides Magento, Commerce Tools, Shopify and BigCommerce, and maybe Salesforce, I think it would be hard to argue that any of the others will be around in the distant future. I think that or will be relevant, I guess.
Hard to disagree with that. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean,
So-
do you know anyone going to Hybris? Do you know
I know people on it, but not going to.
I know some people I know people have left it or are trying to leave it. I don't know a single person going to Hybris.
I'm with you.
I mean, at what point does SAP say, all right, we have no new customers coming to this platform. Why are we
What are we doing here?
Well, I'll share something, one tidbit.
They're never going to join the podcast anymore, by the way. Sorry.
I know.
They're never going to go Hybris.
Hey, Hybris.
Creating enemies here.
The funny thing that I've heard from internally from those folks is that the way that they keep people on Hybris is because they're so locked into other SAP products. I mean, it's not even a surprise, right? You're locked into something else, right?
Same with Salesforce.
Yeah, and Salesforce does that. Salesforce.
And it's
I think Salesforce did a better job with commerce, right? Demandware I think they got further ahead, and I think Hybris, for whatever reason, just kind of didn't. The momentum died faster there. I don't know. There's still people going to Salesforce Commerce Cloud, right? Like
We did a good year, yeah.
Yeah, there's still new customers going there.
So Isaiah, I think we're going to have to wrap up pretty soon. I hope that's okay with everyone here.
Yeah. Are there any, we usually like to give you some final words. Are there any other tangential platforms or advice that you would give, someone maybe not quite as, we're trying to, I think a lot of the sub-billion-dollar market needs a lot of educating. So that's why I'm trying to, give them advice.
Even the multi-billion-dollar market.
They can usually pay their way through it. The ones below.
Money talks, man. Money talks. That's the takeaway from this conversation. No, I would just say, again, do your homework, use the data, leverage the data to make decisions. And when you are looking at a platform, I mean, utilize resources, network, talk to people to say what they like and don't like about things. I mean, that's really helped me. I'm a big network guy. I'm always out there. I'm meeting people. I'm very engaged with digital VPs around the world. And I've been able to get a lot done because of that, where I've talked to somebody who has done something that I'm working on now, and they say, watch out for this, that, and the other.
Yeah. And
you're able to kind of move quicker because of that. So just leveraging your network. I mean, networking is not an outdated thing. That's something that everybody still needs to do to this day. So find mentors in the industry, talk about vendors, talk about platforms, and just figure out the best solution to bring to your company by just going out there and being knowledgeable.
Everything has pitfalls, but right, you went out and got knowledgeable about commerce tools. You probably heard all the things not to do, right? And so, now you're in a better position to make something.
Well, that's how that's how I heard about commerce tools. It's when my relationships with my distributors, they're all telling me, yeah, we use commerce tools. It's great. And I was like, who the hell I don't even know who they are. And then I started exploring them. I started talking to them just for a knowledgeable standpoint. And I was like, these guys are great. And I had never heard of them previously.
Wow. Yeah, no, and I think the data thing is just so important. And most of these companies need to just take inventory of their data. I think they'd be shocked to realize if they actually spend the time to do that, like how much work they need to do on their on the data side of
Sure. Oh, 100%.
Yep, absolutely. I'll echo that. A lot of people they don't know. They don't know what data they have and they don't know what to do with it. So yeah, that's a good bit of advice.
Well, Chris, I would love to have you back for two reasons. One, once you maybe get further along, whether you do select commerce tools or something like that, and you guys progress that, or also we want to hear about this data that you're about to get in the future from all your customers.
Yeah, and I do want to, just so people at my company listening aren't freaking out, we're not actively searching for a new platform right now. The way we've built out our internal system it makes sense for us from a financial standpoint and a control standpoint.
So, Chris, you're not asking for millions of dollars from your company.
Not quite. Maybe down the road.
I just want to make sure that we don't get that.
But yeah, I'm just, as a unbiased party who's not engaged with one platform or the other, I wanted to give my opinion that they're the ones that I'm seeing that are just really trending in the right direction.
Because when you're talking to distributors, you can help educate them and give them feedback, and not all of them are going to be sophisticated like that, and they can get your knowledge that way.
Right. So, totally.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll definitely want you back for sure.
Yeah. No, this was great. I love you guys. Thanks for having me.
Chris.